All right, today we're talking about something new in React, something that fixes one of the most annoying problems out there, components that just forget everything the second you hide them. Let's dive in.
You know the drill, right? You build this awesome interactive component. A user starts playing with it, filling it out, and then for whatever reason, you've got to hide it for a second.
And what happens next? Well, it's usually a huge headache because, poof, just like that, it's gone. It's like the user was never even there. All that data they typed in, any settings they changed, it just evaporates.
And this is the culprit, right here. The old way of doing things, that simple show and component. Well, the consequence is that React literally rips the component out of the DOM. It unmounts it, and that's what causes all the chaos. User input, gone. Internal component state, reset back to 0 every single time.
So, let's talk about the state loss problem, and, more importantly, how to solve it. What if you could hide a component without giving it amnesia? Well, you can, and that's what we're going to dig into right now.
Okay, say hello to the activity component. Its job is actually super simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. Think of it like a wrapper that can put its children into, I don't know, suspended animation. It preserves everything, the UI, the internal state, all of it.
And look at the code. It's a small change, but the shift in thinking is massive. The old way, that's like putting your component through a paper shredder every time you hide it. But the new way, with activity, you're just gently setting it aside, keeping it perfectly preserved, ready to come back at a moment's notice. You're not destroying it, you're just changing its mode.
Okay, so let's see how it actually preserves that component state. And a perfect example for this is something like a sidebar with, an accordion menu inside it.
Without activity, it's the classic frustrating experience. A user expands an accordion section, they hide the sidebar for a second, bring it back, and bam! The accordion's collapsed again. The state is totally lost. But with activity, that expanded section is remembered. The sidebar comes back exactly how the user left it. Much better.
And this isn't just for component state managed with hooks like useState. It also preserves DOM state, like the text a user types into a form. And losing that is sometimes even more frustrating.
I mean, this is a total user experience nightmare, right? Picture this. Someone's typing out a really long message in a text area. They switch to another tab to maybe copy-paste something, and when they come back, the text is gone. With the old conditional rendering, that's what happens. But with activity, because that text area element was never actually destroyed, the text is still there, exactly where they left it. A huge relief.
Okay, so we've established it's a game changer for state, but here's where it gets really interesting. What if I told you activity has a secret superpower? Because it's not just about remembering things. It's also about supercharging your app's performance.
Yeah, activity does more than just remember stuff. It can actually make your app faster in two really powerful ways. Let's break them down. First up is something called pre-rendering. So the idea here is pretty cool. You can tell React to start preparing a hidden component in the background on a low priority. It'll render the component, it'll even start fetching whatever data it needs, all before the user even thinks about clicking on it.
This little sequence shows it perfectly. Step 1, your app loads, maybe on the Home tab. But look at Step 2. In the background, activity is already silently preparing the Posts tab, fetching its data. So what happens in Step 3 when the user finally clicks? The Posts tab appears instantly. There's no loading spinner, no waiting. The content is just there.
Okay, so that's pre-rendering. The other way it speeds things up is through this really clever optimization called selective hydration.
So what does that mean? Basically, activity, kind of like suspense, helps React break your page down into smaller, independent chunks. This lets React hydrate, which is just a fancy word for making the UI interactive, the most important bits first. So things like buttons and menus can become clickable right away, while heavier content that's hidden inside an activity component can load in the background without blocking anything. And the result? Your app feels way faster and more responsive on that initial load.
All right, so this all sounds amazing, maybe even a little too good to be true. And, like with any powerful tool, there are a couple of gotchas, a few things you really need to keep in mind to use it right.
Yeah, this quote from the documentation really nails the issue. See, because the hidden component's DOM isn't actually destroyed, any side effects from it can stick around. When you normally unmount a component, the browser is smart enough to clean up stuff like playing audio or video, but when you just hide it, well, those things can just keep on running in the background.
And the classic example of this is a video player. Imagine you wrap a video in an activity.
You hide it to look at something else, and suddenly you can still hear the audio playing from that hidden component. Definitely not what you want.
But hey, luckily the fix is pretty straightforward. You just need to add a cleanup effect. Using a hook like Use Layout Effect, you can give React a little function to run right before the component gets hidden. And that cleanup function, as you can see here, is the perfect place to just call ref.current.pause on your video. That makes sure everything goes silent when it's out of sight. Problem solved.
You mostly just need to watch out for a few specific tags. We're talking video, audio, and iframe. Those are going to be your most common culprits for these kinds of side effects.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground. Let's do a quick recap. When should you actually use this thing?
It really boils down to three main things. First, state preservation. Use it for tabs, sidebars, pop-ups, anywhere you want to keep UI and form state intact. Second, pre-rendering. Use it to get content ready that the user is probably going to look at next, so you get those instant seamless transitions. And third, selective hydration, to make that initial page load feel way more responsive by chunking up your UI.
So now that we can basically put components into suspended animation, how is this going to change the way you build UIs? It really opens up a new way of thinking, you know? It's not just about showing and hiding anymore. It's about managing a component's lifecycle in a much smarter, more performant way. Definitely something to chew on for your next project.